Hello and welcome to Board Game Madness. I am Mike Ganade, and today we have the number 10 seed, Cartographers, small little roll and write game, versus the number 23 seed, Imhotep, sort of classic Euro worker placement type game. As always, thanks for joining us, and as always, I like to start with a short overview of each game and what they're about. So Cartographers is a roll and write game, or I should say roll and flip game, where you have a deck of cards, you flip over a card, which lets you draw different types of terrain on your map, and the goal is to score the most points and draw the best maps, essentially. So that's what Cartographers is about. One of the neat things about Cartographers is you can play it 1 to 100 players, because the game comes with 100 sheets, and there's nothing that limits the player count in the game other than sort of how many sheets you have. So you can even play this online. This was like a popular game during COVID where people were like playing and streaming the game to everyone to see who could do the best with the flips of the cards, which is a neat thing. Imhotep, on the other hand, is a 2 to 4 player game. It is sort of a unique worker placement-esque building game where everyone has their own cube color, and you're building different things based on different mats, and we'll show off some of this stuff when we talk about production in a second. But on your turn, you can basically get more cubes of your color, put cubes on a ship, or sail a ship to a location to build the pyramid, obelisk, etc., whatever it has to do with sort of Egyptian culture. But the way things come off of you're doing some pre-programming with your workers, because when the ship arrives, you unload it from front to back. So, the player whose color is in the first section of the boat gets to play their cube in that location first or whatever. So it creates these interesting decision space where you're trying to get on the optimal spot of each boat for the optimal place you're going to, but you can't really control everything because a player is going to sail a boat before you may want to, or when you still want to get that last cube on it. So it has this interesting, it's sort of hard to describe. It doesn't really feel like a worker placement game because you're pre-programming, you're just sort of placing your resource of cubes on these boats. And then each location has a really unique scoring mechanism once those cubes are unloaded. So there is a lot of unique elements to it, but I guess you could boil it down to worker placement. This game plays in 40 minutes, which is pretty quick for a game with some pretty in-depth strategy. And similarly, I would say Cartographers, it says on the box 30 to 45 minutes. I'd say it's probably right around there as well, right around 30 to 40 minutes as well. So we have two games here with very different mechanics. They certainly are about the same length of time, which is actually part of the reason I like both of these games so much, is that they give me a pretty great game experience for the time they are on the table. So let's start with production. This is actually going to be pretty short because Cartographers is just a roll and flip game. So again, going into those, everyone gets a sheet and a map to start filling in with different scoring conditions. A lot of the expansive nature of this game comes with new map packs you can buy. I've never needed them. I've played this game a bunch with just the standard default map pack. Although I think I have some map packs from picking them up at conventions and stuff. But they basically just give you different scoring objectives. They don't essentially change the game, but they just give you different ways to score. And the base one has two different sides. There's a chasm on the back, so there are slightly different maps on each side. You get 100 of the basic map, 100 of the abyss map, and then I definitely have promo cards for the decks. You have different scoring conditions you put out, which changes up how the game is scored each time. For different seasons, they'll score different objectives. And they'll give you, this is sort of what the scoring objectives look like. There's different ways to score each type of tile. Whether it's like villages, which are these red squares, valleys and rivers. But these cards sort of make up all the different ways to score forests and things on your map. And then the rest of the cards are the cards you flip over, which are the ones that tell you, what you can do. You can make this shape. It's sort of a Tetramino game where you can make this shape and you can make it forest or water. You can flip over the fishing village and you can make this shapes in water or village. And then of course there's the raids, which is when you pass your map to players on either side of you, and they get to draw some bad guys that show up on your map and try to mess you up. But that's the game. You flip over a card, you look at your map, draw it and put it on the best place you can, and you just play through all 4 seasons, and then the person with the best map and the highest score at the end wins. Let's go over to, as far as production goes, Cartographers is a relatively affordable game. It's probably $25 new. You can definitely get it under $20 if you're looking carefully or waiting for sales. But it has cards, you get a couple little pencils. It has a map book, some cards, and a pencil. The beauty of the game is not in the production. The production's pretty simple, but it's a cheap game anyway. And for the price that you're paying, you're actually going to play that game a bunch and get a lot out of it, in my opinion. So moving over to Imhotep. Imhotep is a bit more expensive, but it's an older game, so you may be able to get it at a pretty competitive price now as well. There are 4 different colors of wooden cubes. They are big blocky cubes. This is by far the nicest component of the game, which is good because it's all about using these cubes to build things on the map. But you've got these ships that are different sizes. This is where the cubes will go. There are some cards that go in the market. There's a scoring board, but there's no pure board. These are the different structures you can build, and there's A and B sides with slightly different scoring rules, so you can use any combination of A and B side here, and it tells you how it scores. But these squares here are just where you place your blocks as you go up and build a pyramid. Obelisks, you obviously build them taller and taller in their spots. And these little notches here are where the boats land. You can see on the bottom here. So, when a boat is filled with cubes, someone will pick it when it's their turn and sail that boat to that location. And then you will unload cubes from front to back onto this mat or board, if you will, and score points accordingly. So again, all about points. You want to contribute the most to building up Egypt in Imhotep, and that is the production. So in this case, we have sort of 2 different price point games. I think both games, as far as production goes, there's not much more you could ask of them. The cardboard in Imhotep is nice and solid. It's not thin. The wooden cubes are nice, and the cards are a decent stock. There's nothing wrong with it. You get a little less in Cartographers, but again, it's a much smaller box game. You get pencils, little pencils with erasers. I personally don't like the pencils, so I guess that can be a slight ding against Cartographers. I prefer to use a pen or colored pencils from Acme or CVS or wherever you can get colored pencils. But you do have your pack of maps. The map boards, as far as art and everything, looks nice enough. There is more artwork in Cartographers. You have some bad guy art with the different creatures that raid, and then each picture, like the homestead, has some nice artwork. So I don't know if you can really pick production here. If you're comparing it straight up, Imhotep is a little bit nicer because it's more expensive. You get more components, but the overall artwork and cards in Cartographers is very solid, and it's not giving you anything. It's not throwing stuff in there that you don't need. So I don't feel strongly that production is really shining over one or the other in this game. The artwork on these boards is nice. Both games look nice on the table. If I had to pick one, if I had to break a tie, I'd probably lean a little bit more towards Cartographer just because I like the art and theme a little bit. It's a little richer, but I'm not going to pick. We're going to push this and we're going to say it's a tie because production is too close to call. You're weighing different price points and different components. There's not a lot of overlap here. Really, I think both are giving you a fair production value for the games that they're offering. So, unlike most cases, there's not like a shining, clearly this production is better than the other. They're both solid. Let's talk about game mechanics though, because here I personally have a clear preference, but mechanically speaking, we have two different games. In this game, you will be flipping over cards. Then everyone simultaneously is filling out their maps together, which is a great thing about Cartographers. It's going to play in that 30 to 40 minutes, no matter whether you're playing with 3 players or 100 players online in some capacity. The game is not going to take drastically longer, other than the fact that the more players you have, the more likely you're to have a player that takes longer than everyone else. But everyone's filling out their map simultaneously, so you're never waiting for your turn per se. You're just waiting for everyone to finish their turn. So if you're a fast drawer, you may be waiting a little bit longer while everyone else finishes filling out their map. But again, the game really consists of the unique scoring mechanisms for each season, and then each season scores scoring mechanisms at different times. It rotates basically. But then you're flipping cards over and you're using this timer in the top. And if you meet or exceed the time of the season ends. So you have sort of dynamic rounds. You don't know how many cards you're going to flip exactly. And then each card gives you a decision of what you can do and what you can draw on your map. And everyone draws on that map together. And then when everyone's done, you flip the card. Occasionally you get raided by monsters and you pass your map to a player to your right or left so they can mess with you a little bit. Then you get your map back and you try to deal with it. But that is the bulk of Cartographers and what it's about. But what I love about it and what it does great is it's called Cartographers and you're literally drawing a map at all times. But we'll talk about that more when it comes to theme. Imhotep, again, I explained the rules earlier. On your turn, you can gain more cubes, and you have like a little cube storage place where you can only hold so many cubes. I think it's take 2 cubes, but I could be wrong. Then it's sail a boat. A boat needs to be mostly full before it can set sail, before you can't sail an empty boat. But that's, and then your other action you can do is you can take a cube and put it on a boat. So this game is really about setting up, like mitigating your risk, or if you really need a cube at a certain position on a certain boat, making sure you sail that boat. But it gives you some really interesting decision spaces because every cube you place on a boat will eventually get you points, even if someone else sails it to in a location that's not ideal for you or maximizing your score. So it's about loading up cubes in different ways and visiting the market to get cards that let you break those rules a little bit and get some more efficiency to maybe make a stronger combo or play to get more cubes in the obelisk or in the temple or in the burial chamber, in a row like you need to score more points. So you're constantly weighing the different puzzles. You basically have 4 different spatial scoring puzzles in front of you with an alternate, and you're trying to figure out how to put your cubes in boats to deliver them to those locations, to build them out in the most optimal scoring path necessary. And you've got some cool cards that'll help you combo and break that a little bit up. This gives you some tools and cards that help you break those combos up. But both these games are super easy to teach. Neither of these games has rules that I think are big stumbling blocks. In fact, among all the games I've sort of been covering in Board Game Madness, I would say that these 2 games are the games that are some of the games, a few of the games, if you will, that you are very unlikely to have stumbling blocks or make mistakes of rules on your first playthrough. You may misunderstand some strategies, and I think you'll learn new things on subsequent plays, but I find it very unlikely that there are major stumbling blocks in getting these games to the table, learning to play these games with new people, teaching these games to new people, or referencing the rule book over something confusing. Both of these games are super smooth to play, and it's funny that they're sort of going against each other because I would say that's a highlight of both of them. They're very rule concise and they make intuitive sense when you're playing them. There's very few rule issues I have with either of these games. It really comes down to game mechanics and preference. And for me, I think Imhotep is an older game that is still very fun every time I get to play the puzzle. I love how fast it is and how much control it gives everyone. Like, there's very little randomness. In the game, the only randomness is if a player sort of outfoxes you and sails a ship first and it doesn't go where you exactly want it. But you have to anticipate that. That's part of the fun of the game. So I love how smooth and quick this game plays for a thinkier Euro game. But for me, Cartographers is probably my favorite game in the sort of roll and write, roll and flip category. I think the scoring cards that change up the scoring, there's a lot more variety there than in Imhotep. It just has two sides. And the way the cards come out and sort of the unpredictability of how long a season is interesting. Having a little bit of player interaction with players messing you up and messing your map up is fun. It's just a really solid game. It's, like I said, it's one of my favorite flip and writes. It's a simple game, yet it's incredibly rewarding to play. And it's one of my favorite roll and write, flip and write games. So for game mechanics, I have to put it through. It literally is my favorite of game in this genre. So for that reason alone, game mechanics, I have to pick it. But the unpredictability of the deck and just the fact that it's a joy to play every time just puts it through. Although I will say that Imhotep is a very smooth, quick playthrough. I just think it lacks some replayability in game mechanics, and there's less direct interaction between players, and it's sort of, the theme is a little more detached mechanically from what you're doing than Cartographers for me. But it's really hard coming up with strikes for that game. There really is nothing wrong with it. It's a very solid, thinky, strategic little game with some interesting puzzles in it that I like a lot. So let's move on to theme. So theme for me, let's talk first. I think building up Egypt is a little more unique in my collection than sort of generic fantasy, which is Cartographers. But for me, theme is not just about the covers of these boxes. It's about how the mechanics and theme lend themselves to each other. And both of these games do a great job of doing that. In Imhotep, you are placing construction materials on boats and shipping it to Egypt to build up, the legendary Egyptian monuments. And you're physically taking your cubes, putting them on boats, and sailing those cubes to locations to build those things. And one of my favorite things is taking those blocks off and stacking them on the scoring boards. And you're building the things that you're actually, the cubes will build the monuments and make them look like, what they should look like. You build cubes in a pyramid. You build an obelisk stack. So there's a lot of cool symmetry and connection between the theme and the mechanics in that game. But making a game out of drawing a map, even if it's in a somewhat generic fantasy world, is a really cool theme. And one of the fun things about playing this game with people is some people will just draw the symbols as quickly and fast as they can to play the game and get the most points in Cartographers. And there are other players who are a little more artistically inclined who will make the absolute most gorgeous detailed maps and go above and beyond sort of the suggested square house with a roof on it for a village, and really be a cartographer and make a really cool looking map. And when you throw in colored pencils in the mix, you're actually going to get some really cool projects. And it brings a really cool arts and crafts artistic element to board games, which even in other roll and writes, when you're writing stuff, I don't think there's this artistic element. And it's one of the coolest things about the theme and what this game allows you to do. Unlike Pictionary, where you're drawing artistic things to get a guess really quickly, you can take the time and make a detailed map, and maybe you make your decision quickly, but then you can spend your extra time making your map a little more detailed and just enjoy the process of sort of drawing something and having an artistic activity to do sort of in a group setting is a really cool thematic thing. It's absolutely delightful for cartographers. And for me, my oldest daughter is super into art, and she loves cartographers because it's literally just an art project for her. I mean, she's playing a game too, but she absolutely adores the process of making the map and getting to draw the map and fill in the cubes and make something and draw something. So for me, thematically with cartographers, that is just such a cool thing that I have to give, the win to cartographers for this category for theme. Both of these themes I like. Both of the themes are tied really well together with the mechanisms, certainly more than other games in this tournament, but Cartographers has that extra thematic flair of introducing art and drawing into the game, which is really magical in my opinion. So last but not least, we have replayability, and I've sort of hinted at this already, but in Imhotep, each board has an A and B side with how each location where you can land a boat works. And you can mix and match, and there's obviously a lot of very different combinations with 5 different boards that you can have of A and B sides, but they don't really interact that much with each other. Each board is sort of its own self-contained puzzle. So once you have scored things, with the temple A, you'll try temple B, which is a little more advanced, a little more complicated scoring. But once you've experienced both puzzles, whether the other side is A or B or whether it doesn't matter. I don't think there's a lot of variability in the set of them all working together because they don't interact with each other. Whereas the scoring in Cartographers, with each thing being worth different victory points at the end of the game and different ways of scoring, whether this is about having, this is earning reputation for every 6 village spaces that you have together. So every time you have like a block of 6 villages together, you get points. This one is about having farm spaces not adjacent to water. So you don't want to have your farm spaces next to water. So having these different scoring things that are drastically different in different combinations and then scoring multiple times a game and how they interact with each other between the different terrain types actually creates much more scoring variability, in my opinion, than Imhotep offers. And Imhotep, and at the same time, you have these other map packs if you're looking for expansion content, and the map sheets you're given have an A and B side as well to give you some different spatial puzzles. So I think there is more replayability in Cartographers, but more important than that even is how fast Cartographers is to set up and tear down. Cartographers is literally setting out your scoring cards and your, season cards in the fall and summer, like the fall and summer. Setting those out so everyone can see them at the table, shuffling up the deck of actions that you flip over, and then you just tear off and give each player one of these sheets and something to write with, and you are set up. It takes minutes, literally minutes. And while Imhotep's setup time is pretty darn quick, almost no game in my collection can touch Cartographer's setup time. It is insanely fast. And teardown is insanely fast. People can keep their maps or throw them out, and you put the cards and extra stuff back in the box. You may even do it as part of setup. It's clearly the winner here too in the replayability setup category. It just can't be beat. So, it wasn't really a fair matchup in my opinion. As I mentioned, this is literally one of my favorite games in my collection and certainly in the category. So no surprise here that Cartographers in this small little box is going to win and overcome Imhotep in this matchup of Board Game Madness. But just how the cookie crumbles does not mean Imhotep is not a good game. Remember that all of these games were personally purchased with my own money and are in my collection for a reason. It just you know, we seeded them based on Board Game Geek rankings, and it's how they fall. And sometimes some of my favorite games have to go head to head in early rounds. It's just the nature of the beast. But in this case, Cartographers, certainly the winner. Thank you for watching Board Game Madness. As always, if you're enjoying this series, please like and subscribe to these videos. Let us know what you think, which game you would pick. Let us know the games you want to see us play in any future. Not making any promises here because this is actually a lot of work to make all these videos. But with encouragement, I'd certainly like to do something like this again and have some of our favorites return for future matchups, or introduce new games that are released every day into the tournament as well. I think you can have an interesting tournament, and the nature of this makes it interesting, potentially year after year. So once again, thank you for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and we will see you tomorrow with another matchup. Thanks again.